Welcome back to the Wingspan Podcast, episode 26. I'm Doug Barak, joined by my co-host Chris Mahala of NetsDaily and our special guest. Our guest is a contributor to NetsDaily.
We welcome Nolan Jensen to the pod. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening and joining Doug and I. What's going on, man? What's up?
I'm doing well over here. I got my health. My family has their health. So it's all you can really hope for at a time like this. You know, I'm excited to talk a little Brooklyn Nets basketball here with you boys today.
Glad to have you on. Glad everyone's well.
So I guess we'll kick it off first. Mostly you discussed a little bit just there, but what you've been up to since kind of COVID-19 put sports and the whole world at halt.
I've been fortunate in the sense that I've been relatively busy, mainly with school. I had four classes last semester, I should say. I got another 4 courses this semester. So the workload has been pretty consistent. Finding article ideas, that's been a little challenging, especially these last couple months here. But, you know, for the most part, like I said, I've stayed busy. That's all I can really hope for. Played a lot of PlayStation 2 games, a lot of PS4, a lot of Warzone action, you know, the usual.
I feel that.
But anyways, can you talk about your journey and where you are today? What college did you go to, and what was your first media position or internship?
Sure. Out here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I'm not sure if you guys knew I was Canadian. I try to be pretty open with my Canadianness. I go to Kwantlen Polytechnic University. I major in history with a minor concentration on journalism. I just started writing January of 2019, so I was 23 when I started. I was unhappy with my career where I was at. I was working in an auto body shop as a parts person. Decided to go back to school, pursue what I always wanted to pursue, which at the time, you know, beforehand I thought it might be an irrational career choice, but why not try it? You know, I want to become a sports journalist. Is what I wanted to become since I was a kid. I'm going to give it a legitimate chance, and that's what I'm doing. So I got my first gig with Fansided, actually blogging about the New Orleans Pelicans back in May of 2019. So that's when they just won the draft lottery. The Anthony Davis trades rumors were off the hook. So it was really, you know, really busy time to be writing about the Pelicans. And then once an opportunity arose for me to write about the Brooklyn Nets, which I'm sure I'll talk about in a bit here, is how I became a Nets fan, I decided to take it. And since then, I've been writing for nothing but Nets. I did that for a few months. I wrote for Elite Sports New York. I wrote for Nets Republic, and now recently here on NetsDaily. So I've enjoyed my journey thus far. I'm definitely not where I want to be. The grind is going to continue, but I've really enjoyed my time spent here on Nets Twitter. I've really enjoyed writing about the Nets and meeting all these new people I've met. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure Chris will want to ask you about any mentors that you've had thus far.
Yeah, so that's a popular question I like to ask our guests on the podcast. I know a lot of listeners always mention that, but yeah, so far you mentioned that you started writing very recently. So far in your kind of short career, has there been any mentors that really stuck out to you, kind of taught you the ropes? And if so, what are kind of some important lessons you learned so far in the field of sports journalism?
Sure. The first person I really met on Nets Twitter was actually our fellow counterpart here on NetsDaily, Matt Brooks. Matt Brooks was kind enough to plug one of my articles when I was writing for Nothing But Nets. We started up a friendship. We communicate daily at this point. He's really helped me in my writing and in my progression. Obviously, Nets Income on NetsDaily, Bob. He's been absolutely fantastic. He's been a great boss. I really enjoy our conversation. He's helped me with direction of writing, how to essentially write, you know, better articles that's more, I guess I'll say, reader friendly, etc. Besides that, you know, Billy Reinhart, he's another guy I talk to basically daily as well. He's really helped. Everyone has been really, like I said, everyone's been really helpful here on NetsDaily. And I'm excited to continue my progression on this site. I'm happy with where I'm at, and I've really enjoyed all the mentorship and all the friendships I've made here thus far.
That's good, man. Yeah, I appreciate. That's good, man. And then, well, first, at least on my behalf, welcome to the NetsDaily family. It's been a great pleasure having you on board.
Appreciate it.
And what would you say your niche is thus far in your early career?
Oh, definitely Joe Harris content, like without a doubt. It's definitely articulating tweets about Joe Harris. I try to do an appreciation post for Joey Buckets at least once a month. I feel like I'm at my best when I'm writing about Joe Harris. But other than that, That's a good question. Like, what essentially my niche is?
Something
I haven't really found
noticed. I've noticed one thing that you're not crediting yourself to. You're our Canadian Matt Brooks, or is Matt Brooks the American, version of you? With the film studies.
I'll give him credit. Yeah, I'll say I'm the Canadian Matt Brooks. I just did a film studies on Karis LeVert here, playing the point guard position, taking a page out of his book. But yeah, like as I said, I haven't really necessarily found my niche yet within where I'm at now with NetsDaily, but I'm certain at some point I will find that.
Oh, definitely look forward to it. So when did you begin watching the NBA? What was some of your early memories? And did you have a favorite team growing up? And when did covering the NBA become a dream and focus of yours?
Sure. So I went to quite a bit. My dad took me to a lot of Vancouver Grizzlies games back in the day. We were only here for 6 seasons before they relocated to Memphis. They only won 89 games in those first 6 seasons. They weren't exactly a successful franchise. I'll take it to my grave. I feel like we never got a legitimate opportunity here in Vancouver. It always felt rushed. The Canadian dollar wasn't worth that much between 1995 and 2001. We didn't have great ownership. I mean, after all, this was an organization that almost traded the draft rights to LeBron James in 2003 for a 35-year-old Otis Thorpe who only played 41 games, and that is the best way I can summarize the Vancouver Grizzlies. My first real memory, honestly, was probably the 2002 Western Conference Finals. My dad's a huge basketball fan, grew up hating the Lakers, so he was obviously invested in this series against the Sacramento Kings. I remember him specifically being upset about the officiating. I think many fans watching that series were. So once the Lakers bypassed the Kings in 7 games, they faced the New Jersey Nets in the 2002 NBA Finals. And this was really the first time I actually myself remember watching the New Jersey Nets. I was a huge Jason Kidd fan. And I remember him being, I guess I want to say almost like spiteful that his final hope for beating the Los Angeles Lakers and not having to witness them three-peat was on the backs of I believe it was like a 49-win New Jersey Nets team. So that would be my first official memory watching basketball.
That's good. And then me and Doug would type back and forth once you were bringing up the Grizzlies. That brings back a lot of nostalgia from when I did the Grizzlies chapter in my book, when I was talking about the globalization. I agree with you, man, because when I was doing my research with that, you're right. They were put at a disadvantage right away, and they were rushed. Obviously, their draft right away didn't really kick off as well, and then as you just explained, I'm not going to deep dive into it, but you explained it right there. They were kind of rushed, and I feel like indeed, as we're going to talk about later on in the podcast when we talk about possible relocation options, if the NBA is looking to pursue to add a team or relocate a team, I think Vancouver is definitely a spot that they should look at.
Definitely in the top 5. I would agree with you too. I wouldn't assume that I wouldn't assume that we're the first option. I'm pretty sure that would go to like Seattle or Vegas, but we could definitely hold a basketball team now, I believe, generation later in Vancouver.
And then to talk about Canadian basketball as well, since we're on the topic of it, what important, at least especially as you as a Canadian native, when you look back at Vince Carter and what he did for the city of Toronto, especially outside just the basketball, putting Toronto on the map in the NBA world, can you just talk about the importance of someone that's from that country and could talk from experience, especially?
Sure, it's no secret at this point. We're still, even at this point, a hockey country. But Vince Carter, like what I like to say is Vince Carter for Canadian basketball is kind of synonymous with what Wayne Gretzky was for American hockey. He made it cool. It was definitely from a cultural aspect. He made basketball a talking point in this country, and that's so important to where we are right now. You know, without Vince Carter, I'm not sure I'm even pursuing the career I am. He was loved. December of 2004, a lot of fans, especially in Toronto, obviously turned on him a bit. I mean, the last 2 years as a Raptor weren't exactly stellar. There was organizational rifts, trade demands, et cetera, et cetera. It was a whole shtick. But I myself, especially from the West Coast here in Vancouver, I always had an irrational hatred of the Toronto Raptors. They survived. We didn't. They had their franchise cornerstone. Steve Francis never wanted to play for us. We were gone in 6 years. And within 6 years, the Toronto Raptors, I believe they were number 1 in attendance. So they survived. We didn't. Once they lost Vince Carter, I followed him. To New Jersey. And I kind of fell in love with that team, with RJ, Vince Carter streaking down either wing, Jason Kidd in transition. I honestly believe that they were a big and maybe a couple depth pieces away from being legitimate contenders. I mean, the furthest they got was the second round, got bounced by the Miami Heat and D-Wade and Mourning, and then obviously a couple years later they got bounced by LeBron James and the Cavaliers in 2007 playoffs. So they weren't exactly the most successful organization, but man, was that team fun, and just how Vince Carter had a cultural significance in Canada. I also think he had that in New Jersey for a generation of fans. Maybe not to the same extent, but he made basketball fun. Like watching Vince Carter, do 360 dunks in game, watching him poster essentially every big in the NBA within like a 10-year span. It was super enjoyable. And I followed the New Jersey Nets to Brooklyn, where honestly I became even more of a fan. The whole cultural intrigue surrounding Brooklyn and in New York City. They're just, it's always been like a fun team in my opinion. Even after the infamous Billy King trade, I always had a soft spot in my heart for the Brooklyn Nets, and now especially writing for them, that attachment, that endearment has only grown tenfold.
That's a cool story to hear. And then I guess let's get into the NBA bubble talk. So right off the bat, what are your thoughts on the NBA going through and reviving their season? What's your overall thoughts on that?
I mean, just from like a logistical standpoint, financial standpoint, you avoid a lockout because I'm assuming that if basketball was not resumed, the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the players union, and the owners lightly gets ripped up, and nobody really wants a lockout, and we have to go even longer without basketball. Or if we've been starved this last 4 months, some days has been worse than others, especially from like a content creation standpoint. Ultimately, you want nothing more than the safety and security of their players. It came out that 2 out of 322 players tested were in fact positive. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about like Rashawn Holmes. He has to quarantine for the next 10 days because he wanted, I don't know, Chipotle or some sort of fast food, some delivery service. But I have cautious optimism. I'll say that. Like I've always had cautious optimism. Am I an expert on all things, COVID-19 related? No, not exactly. I've heard that inside of the bubble is safer than outside. Again, I'm not an expert on that. I'm not going to really speak into it in depth, but I'm happy that basketball's returning. Even if the Nets roster is completely depleted, I still have a lot of intrigue with certain pieces, and it can also be the last time we see certain players on the rotation in a Nets uniform. So cautious optimism. I'll return to that. I'm cautiously optimistic, boys.
Yeah, then as you say, you're cautiously optimistic. What have you liked so far, and what have you disliked so far? What are like those main points that kind of hit on you so far with this bubble talk?
I'll be honest with you. I've absolutely loved the content coming out of the bubble, especially like NBA Bubble Life. And I'm sure you guys follow them on Twitter. You got Matisse Thybulle creating videos. It's that whole like human aspect to these athletes that we all love and adore. It's been really nice to see. You got Myers Leonard, perfect execution, shotgunning a beard. You got JJ Redick doing the same and stuff like that. Like it is enjoyable to watch, but ultimately it's all fun and games, but we really should be caring about like the safety and security of the players, and that's what matters most. So far, only 2 players have tested positive, and they're going through with quarantining, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure they're going to take care of that. Other than that, I mean, the only real injury has been Rajon Rondo's hand. He's been out now, I believe it was 6 to 8 weeks. I'm not one to necessarily attach an asterisk to whoever ends up winning an NBA title this season. I can see why the public would, but essentially everyone's in the same set of circumstances. So yeah, I'm not going to be putting an asterisk on this year's title team.
And then one thing I want to get your thoughts on as well is players like Matisse Thybulle, who have kind of taken on an extra hobby within the bubble to kind of cure that boredom factor by blogging and creating his own YouTube videos to highlight what is life like in the bubble. So I don't know if you have seen it at all yet, but overall, aside from just him, what do you like about that kind of elements to athletes kind of pursuing other type of hobbies, especially productive hobbies that catch a lot of media attention within that bubble?
It's entertaining. I just as I mentioned with the NBA Bubble Life account, with what Matisse Thybulle is doing, it's always nice to see the human aspect to these athletes that, hey, they're kind of, you know, just like us. There was a video of Kyle Kuzma. I think it was an Instagram story of Jason Tatum playing golf. You have Joel Embiid, or was it Ben Simmons, fishing. It almost honestly acts as like a reality TV show. And I think, like, outside of what Matisse Thybulle is doing, I think the NBA should also look at it from that standpoint as well. Like, this is a content creation goldmine. I don't know how you guys feel, but that's just my perspective.
Oh, I completely agree. This is potentially going to be at the level of The Last Dance if they play their cards right. We have no clue what the NBA is doing besides what teams show and what players show. I mean, we have the new sitcom of Bobby and Luca, which is painful for Tobias Harris to see. And as you mentioned, Ben Simmons, people are making a joke that he can't even hit open water when throwing a fish back in. So someone called PETA. You know, the fishing has been interesting, the golfing. Josh Hart waiting to move up his golf cart and chugging or gently, you know, taking a nice gulp of champagne. So it's a nice human element. And the gaming has been phenomenal, like the setups and things. So we'll definitely talk about must-haves in the bubble in a little bit. But I love everything they've done. I'm kind of envious. I mean, I know there are a lot of ramifications. If I was a basketball player, you know, soft tissue injuries like some have already done. And obviously, you're not that the bubble is immune, but it's certainly safer. But there are those aspects. But me personally, I think it'd be fun. It's like living on a college campus all over again.
Right.
And you're doing what you love. You're not just studying. So there's that.
No, I would definitely agree with that. It actually, honestly, like from what we've seen thus far, outside looking in, I don't know if Chris agrees with this too. It kind of does look a little fun. Like, I am a little envious of what's going on in that bubble. They look like they're having a pretty good time. As long as the safety and security is there too, I got no complaints.
100%.
And then I got to ask you too, what would it take you to break quarantine in the NBA bubble? Because I know Bobby Marks put out something that there's a financial penalty if a player breaks quarantine once the seeding games start on July 30th. I think it's like each game missed will project to roughly like 1% of salary, and you'd have to stay in your room for 10 or more days and stuff like that. So realistically speaking, if you were in that bubble, and I know, like we talked about, there's a lot of entertainment there, and from the players to what the bubble does have to offer, what are some things that would stick out in your head that, like, you know what, like maybe I could go for a nice McDonald's Big Mac, or maybe I could go for like certain things. Like, what are
setting the bar low there, Chris?
Yeah.
You know, those are pretty good. At least that's a preference of mine. But what would it take for you to break quarantine in the bubble?
Oh man, if they gave me what Troy Daniels was eating, I'd be the first one to hit up the local Applebee's. Like, no doubt in my mind.
I agree with that.
You guys are killing me with the food bar low.
But you know, like, there's other more, I guess we'll say, like, more important aspects to it too. Like, take for instance Gary Temple and his wife, and she's pregnant. I'm not exactly sure when they're expecting, but if that were to happen, if that were to happen in the middle of the bubble, I would want to talk to the organization. I'd be like, you know what? It's time for me to go home. It's time to be with my family. It definitely have to be a family-oriented issue for me. That was what would make me leave the bubble.
Agreed. And then I got to ask you too, what are the 5 must-haves within the bubble? I think me and Doug can give our picks after this, but what are like the 5 things you're bringing to the bubble? Man,
you know what? I don't think anyone's mentioned this. I haven't seen it brought up. Are you allowed to bring your dog to the bubble? Is that permitted?
I don't know.
I haven't seen anything stating otherwise, but I think that's a valid point. I was actually thinking before we hopped on the pond, like, they should have like dog adoption, you know, puppy fair. Like, you get in 3 months, you get to train this dog, be with it all the time, like, and they're like the best as long as you have no allergies. You know, for therapy. Oh my God! Like, they could even do a petting zoo. Bring a petting zoo onto the thing.
Yeah, like, I'm a huge pet person. I got pet mice. I got a pet German Shepherd / Black Lab. I'd want to see if I can bring my dog in. For me, that would have to be a must-have. I'd bring my old PS2, old reliable. What else would I bring? Probably my computer. See if I can get a couple articles in between games here. I'd bring the latest basketball book, which right now I'm reading Kirk Goldsberry's Sprawl Ball. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's like an analytical book about how the game is altered from a geographical standpoint in game over the years. I would definitely bring that. That puts me at 4. My last must-have, man, is that a good question? I feel like it's such a basic response, but you know what? I need my phone too. So
Well, I think
those
that's a
would be my last
guarantee.
must-have.
No, come on.
That's a guarantee.
that's a
Okay, you know what? I'll
guarantee.
be more creative. Outside of that, man, it'd have to be. Oh God. You know what? It's going to be my lucky Mike Bibby Vancouver Grizzlies jersey. I never know when I'm going to need that.
I like that. I like that answer. All right, Doug, you want to shoot yours next?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm definitely bringing my Xbox. I mean, someone's helping me out with the carrying and shipping of things if I don't have to worry about the schlepping. I'm definitely bringing my Xbox, a nice sized monitor, and then probably my computer. That way and hopefully my computer can be upgraded because right now it's from 2012 when I made it. So that's technically three things because I'll just say that the special monitor is not the one coming with the desktop. Man, that's really good. Something food related, like having a special ability, like, I don't know, an upgraded mini fridge or something stocked like crazy. That's 4.
Gotta have beer.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, man. I've been on like this crazy weight loss, man. I'm trying to stay away from that, especially when I'm trapped. Well, actually, I guess they have a gym and whatnot. Hey, that's tough, man. Let's see, computer, big monitor, Xbox. Nice size mini fridge. Man, I really don't. I guess extremely comfortable mattress. I don't know what Disney's packing, but just in case, I bring my own Tempur-Pedic. What about you, Chris?
Okay, well, considering that I have a TV provided to me, that's considering that factor, I got to bring my Xbox One. Got to bring my laptop. I'm gonna bring the book of basketball. I'm reading that. It's by Bill Simmons. It's a really good.
Oh
book.
yeah.
I'm reading that, so I'm gonna bring that. I'm going old fashioned. I got to bring my GameCube. And then I think my last one. Oof, man. I'm pretty set with those 4. Honestly, I don't think I need a 5. I think I'll bring 4. I think those are my 4 for now.
Yeah, I probably should have traded up to like a hot plate if that's allowed or something so I could cook and actually utilize the larger fridge that I was referring to. Oh, man.
Oh, maybe some DoorDash credit. Maybe that. I'll take some DoorDash credit.
That's all it means.
Risking the quarantine.
Yeah, definitely some Dash credit. Just leave it at the very exit of the bubble, and I'll have someone go out and get it, or I'll go pick it up off something. But I would say those are my 5. I had to say 5. Who do you think? I can't give an answer to this because personally, there's so many factors that go into it. But if you did have to pick, who does win this whole thing?
Damn. You know what? It's funny that I mentioned that because this is something I'm going back and forth with myself. I just have a really hard time, and it's one thing that's kind of remained constant, I guess, in my predictions, is I have a hard time going against the tandem of LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I really feel like going into this year's playoffs, AD could emerge as, what he potentially could be, was as a top 5 player in the NBA, be a legitimate, he already is a legitimate second option, but in some games maybe even take over, essentially, a la what LeBron did with D Wade in 2012 to a certain extent. I had the Lakers. I understand that depth isn't exactly phenomenal in that roster. They don't really have too many ball handlers, and he just lost Rondo. I can definitely be talked into the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they get a bad rap for what happened in last year's Eastern Conference Finals. It's a year removed from that. Chris Middleton had a phenomenal season. Giannis is a 1 year better. They got floor spacing. They got depth beyond like recognition. I mean, if you look at like ESPN's real plus minus metrics, I mean, it's just filled with Milwaukee Bucks players, and they got one of the best coaches in the association in Coach Bud. So I think we're destined to see a Lakers-Bucks final. And from there, I mean, like you said, there's so many different factors, right? I mean, it's actually in the realm of possibility that a significant role player or a key player gets this virus and then has to sit out essentially 2 weeks. There's so many different factors that we have to take in. It's truly unprecedented times. But I'm still looking at old reliable, aka LeBron James, and I'm having a hard time betting against him. If I had to say who's going to come out on top, I'm going to go Lakers, especially if they get in the rhythm. This is how I feel right now at this given moment.
Yeah, I personally was going for the Bucks before the bubble. Right now, I'm so uncertain because these players have had rest, and some actually have personal gyms in their homes or really close. So that is a factor we are not ready for yet. So switching over to a more local team, even though they are abroad, with the Nets. So how many seeding games do you think they will win?
This is a good one.
Knowing their current roster. All that change in chemistry.
I actually brought this up in a recent podcast I did with Jack Manuel and Nick Fay on the Brooklyn Buzz. I had 2. I think they can beat the likes of the Magic or the Wizards. I even went as far as saying I think there's going to be a game where Jamal Crawford and Karis LeVert go scorched earth and combine for like 60 points against like that hellacious Wizards defense, and they grab one there. Maybe the Magic have an off night from the field. Maybe they win a game through just defensive intensity. I'm going to give them 2. I will say this, like, confidently, there is no chance in hell for me for the Wizards to make up lost ground. We're not getting a lottery pick. There's no real way of tanking here, even with the roster as is. I'll give them 2. 2 and 6.
Yeah, I'm more hopeful to 3 or 4. 4 is really the shocker, but I still think 3. I would like to take the over on that current online bet thing. Not that I gamble, but and then when it comes to the playoffs, depending on where they seed, I mean, if they are the 8th seed, I'm sure they're getting swept. So let's stick to if they were the 7th seed, how many games are they winning, and who do you think they play?
That's another good one because it's still a bit of a crapshoot. Like the Celtics could still potentially take that 2nd seed. I would actually want to play the Celtics. We're kind of a weird, good matchup against them. Even the Raptors, I mean, the games that we played, I mean, warranted it was a completely different roster last time we saw the Nets play the Celtics or the Raptors. But they were competitive contests. Even in the Miami Heat, I mean, the games against the Heat this year, a couple of them were decided in the 4th quarter. I mean, I don't think any of the games were beyond a 10-point difference. They played them tight as well. So this is a gritty team. Like these Nets, I mean, all things considering, you look at this last season, to go 30 and 34 in its own right was kind of sensational. You know, they made the 10 count every single time. They just refused to roll over and die. It was really the next man up mantra. I mean, 11 games of the season, we lose Kyrie Irving, we lose Karis LeVert, and then before we know it, we're 16 and 13 after a 4-7 start with Karis LeVert and with Kyrie Irving. So this is a gritty bunch. I do like Jacques Vaughn. I like that Jacques Vaughn came out and said that he's essentially studied the schemes that worked within Kenny's system, but he's fine-tuning them to a certain degree. And that's why I honestly believe that Jacques Vaughn has a legitimate shot in winning this coaching gig, because Kenny did have some great schemes, and if he can fine-tune them, he can be better with the rotation with in-game adjustments. He's going to have a legitimate shot at winning that coaching gig. So I don't know how you guys feel about that. I don't know what degree that take is, but I like him.
It's optimistic enough. But we'll touch upon that a little bit more in just a bit. So which players do you think fans should focus on in the bubble? I know you mentioned 2 of them thus far, but are there anyone else besides Joe and Karis on your radar?
Chiozza. Definitely Chris Chiozza. We'll see if he gets thrusted into that starting point guard role. I mean, I, like many others, saw potential, really liked this game, but he has still only played 282 minutes in the NBA. I mean, for context or perspective, Iman Shumpert played 240 minutes in his ever so brief Brooklyn tenure. So I'll be looking to see how he adjusts to a more demanding role, I should say, especially if he is in that starting rotation. He could be seeing like 25 to 30 minutes a night. Let's see how he does. A couple other players that I'm definitely going to have interest in. Jared Allen. I tweeted this out not long ago. I actually would like to see Jared Allen take 2 to 3 3-point attempts per game. At this point, you know, we've all advocated for an expanded offensive arsenal for the Fro. Still only 22. He shot 5 of 15 from 3 as a rookie, 75% from the line. There was always that potential that he might be able to expand his range, fade off pick and rolls, and knock down threes. At this point, you don't really have much to lose. I mean, it could act either as trade bait to say, hey, this guy, you know, is really one of the best, analytically speaking, defensive young big men in the league. still the potential that he, gets a 3-point shot as his career goes on, and he could be a really versatile weapon. Or, we keep him and he's on our depth chart next season, and maybe he attempts 0.5 to 2 3-point attempts per game. That could really, I feel like, personally help his game, or just fade off and knock down like a 17-footer. So his offensive arsenal is expanded from, just the exclusive roll man in the pick and roll or crashing the offensive glass to get his buckets. I think that could help his game quite a bit. Jamal Crawford, another guy I have interest in. This could essentially act as a farewell tour. We all know it. He can drop 51 points on one night, or he can go 1 of 7 from the field and drop 4 the other. He's always been a fun player to watch. Besides that, Michael Beasley coming in Game 6 after he finishes his 5-game suspension for the NBA's anti-drug policy. I like to see what he is as a scoring threat off the bench. Obviously, a friend of Kevin. He has a legitimate opportunity to be on this rotation next season. I mean, all that's really going to be asked of him, especially in the bubble, is to score. Those little things, he can basically hand those to the other rotation pieces or depth pieces on the rotation. He's just exclusively going to be asked to score, and that's what he does best. If it's anything like his New York Knicks tenure, where he averaged 13 a game on 50% shooting and almost 40% from 3 and 78% from the line, he'll be fine. I feel like I'm missing a player. It's just the rotation has changed so much. I guess, I do have interest in Tyler Johnson. I've been pretty hard on him. I believe he's an inefficient combo guard. He had a really terrible season in Phoenix this year. I mean, marginally better than what Theo Pinson is, and that's no offense to Theo Pinson. He was obviously a great culture player, but his on-court production was lacking this season, let's be honest. So I do have interest to see how he looks within this rotation. Like I said, Karras and Joe, can't say enough about those guys, the focal points of the offense. Obviously, I wanted to see them play well. And I don't know, it was Dante Hall as well. I don't know how many minutes he's going to get. I'm assuming quite a bit just because we're so, short on bigs. He's a 6'9", uber athletic big, got 7'5" wingspan, only half inch shorter than Jared Allen. Defensive monster. I mean, all SEC defensive team in college. All NBA G League team defensive this past season, so he's done it at every level. He's respectable from the free throw line, shot about 75%, plays for the chip. He's just a mean jump out the gym type of individual. I'm curious to see what he looks like on the rotation as well.
Definitely, and third time's a charm. So let's bring up Karras, since you recently wrote about him in your latest article for NetsDaily,
sure.
And how in the bubble he'll definitely be making his case to be that cornerstone player that the Nets, traded for, drafted/traded, or the terminology.
Yeah, no, I'm actually advocating for Karras at the 1. That's what I would like to see. We've all seen with the ball in his hands, with the high usage rate, he can produce. We saw in the Philadelphia series last year, obviously. And from February 3rd to March 11th, the final 5 weeks of the NBA season, he had a 30% usage rate compared to Spencer Dinwiddie's 25, and he put up better than 24 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.7 steals on really efficient splits. And now this is unofficially is his team. He's far and wide, but beyond a shadow of a doubt, the best player on this current iteration of the Brooklyn Nets. He's going to have the ball in his hands, be it as a starting point guard or just running offensive sets through him like they did in the final 5 weeks of the NBA season. I think there's plenty to be excited about surrounding his game. I think he's capable of putting up some really monstrous performances. We know with Karras, he takes a while to get in rhythm. Obviously, a 4-month hiatus from playing basketball. He could take a few games, but once he finds that rhythm, once he gets consistency and plays organically within the flow of the offense, he is capable of some monster games like we saw against, obviously, the Boston Celtics, or his triple-double against the San Antonio Spurs in the final week of the NBA season.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's going to be must-watch basketball. Which leads into out of the bubble after the season. So what do the Nets need to do to win a championship? What moves should they make, if any? And I know you mentioned Jacques Vaughn, but who else is on your coaching list?
For me, I always liked Mike D'Antoni. Does his offensive philosophies fit in with what Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant are? I mean, that's questionable, but I really think he can maximize the effectiveness of this offense. And I think he also gets a bad rap for being a poor defensive-minded coach. I mean, when the Rockets were 1 game away essentially from winning an NBA championship back in 2017, I believe. They had an 8th-ranked defense. So, I mean, you can't be a terrible defensive-minded coach and have a top 10 defense. It doesn't really compute with me. I think he could be a great fit. Will he be the guy? I doubt it. I lean towards like a Jacques Vaughn, Ty Lue / type that whose philosophy is intertwined more with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving's. But besides that, from a player's standpoint, I mean, we've all known that Bradley Beal has been the rumored 3rd-star target for quite some time. I think he makes, if you do acquire him, and that's a big if because Washington doesn't necessarily need to make this trade. They could wait it out, see what Brad Beal and John Wall look like next year. They got some quality pieces on their rotation. I'm see how Rui Hachimura develops. I mean, they have the luxury of potentially waiting another year or maybe even waiting till next year's trade deadline, whenever that is, to make this deal. But let's just say, for like argument's sake, they do. Having 3 top 20 players in the NBA, depending on where you put Bradley Beal, makes Sean Marks' job a lot easier. You fill in the rotation with vet minimum types. I mean, people wanting to ring chase at the end of their career that still are, quality role players. Kind of like what the Bucks did with like Brook Lopez, George Hill, Wes Matthews, of that fold. I think that would make Sean Marks' job a lot easier, especially having, 3 top 20 players in the playoff series once the rotations inevitably shorten up to like an 8-9 man rotation. Having that's incredibly dynamic. Defensively, you could, maybe spot out some negatives there, but offensively, that is about as good as it can possibly get. I would say it's not necessarily required of the Nets this offseason to go get the likes of a Brad Beal type. I think you can also make moves just around the edges. You don't have to do anything too significant. You don't have to entertain a blockbuster trade. I mean, as is currently, I mean, you got a 6th Man of the Year candidate in Spencer Dinwiddie. You got a budding star in Karis LeVert. You got one of the best catch-and-shoot threats in the NBA in Joe Harris, who's a must-re-sign. And then you add in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving into the fray. That's a really good team. And you got Nick Claxton coming up, who could be a significant role player or contributor to this team in a season's time. And then you could go get the vet types like Wilson Chandler, Garrett Temple, etc. You see what you can do about them. We'll go as far as saying like a Paul Millsap type. Or I know Ibaka has been someone that's been on Nets fans' radar for quite some time. So either way, I think this is going to be a really good Nets team next year. I mean, you got a 2 to 3 year title window. It doesn't necessarily have to happen next season, but I think you can also address potential roster needs in next year's trade deadline. So I wouldn't necessarily say that a blockbuster trade for a 3rd star is a must for this offseason.
Yeah, it sounds like you're looking more for solid role players at this point to fill the void, to be battle ready. And then since you mentioned him, Bradley Beal, so he was mentioned in the investment group to bid on the Mets, led by, and that's METS, just to clarify that the Nets are not being bid on while Joe Tsai's in charge, by J-Lo and A-Rod. So Bradley Beal and Mason Plumlee joined that void. So should Nets fans, NETS, take that with a grain of salt?
I mean, yes, but will they? I wouldn't assume so, especially on Nets Twitter. We know how it is, especially when Bradley Beal gets mentioned. But it is an interesting little tidbit, It looks like Bradley Beal is intrigued by the culture surrounding New York City. I mean, we heard that he came out and said that he was really excited that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving would even think of him as a potential budding 3rd star and a championship contender. I think there's real intrigue there for Bradley Beal. I also would take it with a grain of salt because, as I mentioned, there's nothing that really indicates that he's incredibly unhappy in Washington. So, yeah, it's a nice little interesting tidbit, but it's also just that for me at this point.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, Mason Plumlee is also an unrestricted free agent, so it could theoretically work. But as you mentioned, even though he's invested potentially financially here, even though they haven't made the bid or got the winning bid, KD has a team in Philly, so it's not like KD's leaving us right away. So it kind of throws that. And then acknowledging Nets history. So the Nets have said that they are going to do, not the Nets organization directly, but they've strongly hinted that they are doing a throwback jersey. Actually, no, I'm sorry, Josiah. So yes, that is the next strategy. So what jersey of your choices from the New Jersey or even Long Island era? What is your jersey choice or choices like top? Let's go top 3 choices.
Top 3? Okay, gotcha. Number 3 is definitely the tie-dye Drazen Petrovic era. I love that jersey. It's so colorful. It really pops. Number 2 would probably be the red alternates. Alternates from, I believe it was like 2004 to about 20 or 2009. Definitely in that Vince era. I would go with that at number 2. And number 1, my favorite Nets jersey of all time, always will be, is the light grays from the 2002/2003 NBA Finals run. That's what that's definitely going to be my top pick.
Okay. And what about you, Chris? What are your top 3?
I would honestly have to go with the same ones he picked. Like I said, I'm a big New Jersey guy, so I'd like to see the red with the Nets. I'd like to see that one as well to add in that list. But that's a solid list. I would have to obviously give my condones to those as well. I would love to see those 3 jerseys up there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I appreciate those. Even though I'm just a Brooklyn era fan, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. I prefer the regular Drazen blues, the Kenny Anderson, the Derek Coleman ones. I don't know. The tie-dye is just not for me. I guess I'm boring like that. And then I also like the New York ABA ones. And then from another New Jersey, I'm either going with the Reds or the gray. I'm a little undecided about that, but we're probably only getting 1 throwback, so we got to make it count. And then we've mentioned him a few times already. So are we retiring VC?
Oh, this is a good question because he only played 4.5 seasons in New Jersey. He put up some monster statistical years, but it's not exactly like the team had a great amount of success. But I think you also have to take into account that New Jersey/Brooklyn Nets, I mean, you don't got too many players up on the rafters, right? This is not necessarily a historic franchise a la Boston Celtics or Los Angeles Lakers. It might be a pessimistic, way of going about it or thinking about it, but you have to take that into account. And you also have to take it into account, like I said, with what he was in Canada and what he was in New Jersey, the cultural aspect of it. The human highlight reel, Vinsanity, half man, half amazing, all that has to be taken into consideration. I mean, if the Oklahoma City Thunder can retire Nick Collison's jersey, I feel like we can safely retire what Vince Carter was for those 4.5 seasons. It was nothing short of electric. He electrified a generation of New Jersey Nets fans. A lot of us look back at that era fondly, even though, like I mentioned, there wasn't too much team success. I'd say, yeah, you got to put his jersey up there.
And then I got to ask you too right here. First, I guess you could say we were talking a little bit about this before we hopped on the pod. So where does Kenny Atkinson land? Where does he land? Personally, I think if it's not the Knicks, it's got to be the Hawks. At least I think. Obviously, from now till when the coaches, obviously, there's going to be more coaches that get let go and get fired and get replaced, and the market's got to obviously open up. But New York and Atlanta are hot spots for me right away.
If the Knicks were smart, they would have dropped everything they're doing and would have personally just all out gone for Kenny Atkinson. But it doesn't feel like that's the direction they're going to go in. It looks like it's Tibbs' job to lose. So at that point, for Kenny, I'd like to see Atlanta or I'd like to see Chicago. Those are my 2 kind of hotspot destinations, if you will. It looks like Jim Boland's days in Chicago, or at least he should be numbered. There's a lot of talent on that rotation. We all know that Kenny's schemes favor developing talent, for better and for worse at times. So he can really help turn that situation around. Atlanta, I mean, you gave him Trae Young, you gave him John Collins, Clint Capella, that pick and roll. You got floor spacers and Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter, etc. That is just such an alluring fit offensively, and he could really help that team out on the other end of the floor too. So for me, it would be Atlanta and Chicago. Those are my 2 hotspots for Kenny.
Yeah, and I mean, other than the Knicks, where it's more than an obvious choice, one for he doesn't have to move far, and the roster's in a good transition. I do like the Bulls. I do like the Hawks, but not enough's going on with the Hawks yet for me to push them in that spot. one that doesn't get talked about enough because everyone's like, oh, they have a coach and it's unlikely that he'll get out, is the Kings. I'm a big fan of Kenny in Sacramento just because you have a lot of guards and wings, which is very much his play style. So, and also Luke Walton hasn't just, won it over for me.
No, he hasn't. No, that's actually an interesting dark horse candidate for me.
I like that dark horse candidate. But all right, at least the last question on my end for you, since you are over the border a little north from us. But should the NBA consider expansion? If so, where should they add teams and where should they get moved? So I guess you could name 3 locations or however many locations you want off the top of your head that makes sense.
So my immediate bias is obviously for Vancouver. The Grizzlies were told back in the 90s that we're a generation of basketball fans away from having this being a legitimate option for the NBA. They kind of rushed things. It wasn't an ideal fit for either party. Like I mentioned, Canadian dollar wasn't worth that much. Ownership was just terrible. Attendance began to slip because we couldn't win more than 22 games in any given season. I would love one day for basketball to return to Vancouver. That's my ultimate wish. Is it likely to happen? I don't know. David Stern did admit that one of his biggest downfalls, or one of his biggest disappointments or regrets, I should say, was that the Vancouver project did not work. It was terrible. I mean, I still think that this can be a legitimate home for an NBA team, especially now. But, it's such a sour taste in the NBA's mouth and in the city's mouth. It's only not even 20 years removed yet. I still think we're quite a ways away. If the NBA does relocate or does expand, my 2 options would probably Seattle or Las Vegas, and maybe a dark horse in like Louisville, Kentucky. Seattle, more than anyone else, they deserve an NBA team. Kevin Durant, I mean, as long as Kevin Durant's in the league too, he's going to be pushing that down the NBA's throat. We all know that he's been pretty vocal about basketball returning to Seattle, a return of the Supersonics. I mean, they're getting an NHL team here in the next couple of years. The Key Arena has been completely renovated. I think that they could also be a host, definitely, of an NBA team. We've seen what the NFL is doing in Vegas. NHL is done in Vegas too. NHL, especially the Golden Knights, have tremendous levels of success. So I can definitely see a team being put there before Vancouver, and also Louisville. It's a basketball city, in my opinion. That would be my dark horse candidate. As much as I want to say at the top, Vancouver, we deserve a team more than anyone else. It's not justifiable. I would put those 3 cities ahead of us for sure.
So if you're adding 2 teams, which sounds like out west has been the verdict, who's moving east, even though geographically it's kind of obvious?
I know that the Memphis Grizzlies, their owner, has inquired about potential relocation. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if we do expand and we get 2 teams in the west, probably the Pelicans and Grizzlies. It would have to be, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, they would be. Yeah, they're just barely, like, if you look at the line of Chicago and that kind of thing, they're pretty much there as it is. So, and since you mentioned Seattle, Vancouver, Vegas, kind of like the higher ups, and they're already located west, make it easy.
Yeah, no,
I don't think they should just do 1 team. They should definitely do 2. So I agree with you on those cities. One that would be interesting would be Mexico City, to add another international team into the mix, and Seattle, only because it's different. And I think when the NBA has gone down there, they've had a great showing of fans, and it could be, the whole Toronto, but south of the border.
No, for sure.
What about you, Chris?
For sure. If I had to pick a couple spots off the top of my head, Seattle's definitely going to be the number 1 option. I feel like if the first team to really consider that, because obviously basketball over in Seattle is just different. If you looked at, just go on YouTube and just type in Seattle Supersonics basketball, the legacy is there. Obviously, they're not the most winningest team when they were in Seattle and stuff like that, but just the legacy that was there, and I would love to see a team back in Seattle. I feel like there's an empty void there, especially in the basketball world and the NBA world in Seattle. Take a page out of your guys' book. I'd like Las Vegas as well. I feel like that was more of a business standpoint move. If they're thinking about relocating, obviously everything is business when it comes to relocation, but Las Vegas makes the most complete sense in that aspect. And I do like Doug's take about saying Mexico City, because Obviously, that takes a little more work because obviously different currency. There's a lot of stuff that go into there, similar to what goes on when they wanted to do the Canada moves and everything, and why that took so long when they were making the Toronto Raptors and the Vancouver Grizzlies. It took years to really establish and finalize that. But I would say those three definitely stick out to me, but I would say Seattle is definitely on deck to get their team. But I think that's where we're going to wrap it up. But thank you, Nolan, once again for joining us. I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to Doug and I and join the Wingspan Podcast, my man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, great. Stay well, and we'll talk soon. Hopefully, good news only.
Yes, sir.
All right, Chris, take us home.
Yep, you got it, man. So remember, guys, feel free to send us over any suggestions, questions, comments, or thoughts on any of our content by sending an email to wingspanpodcast@gmail.com. And do not forget to follow us on our social media channels. And most importantly, though, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on any of your preferred listening services. As for next time, stay classy, take care, and keep on staying safe, people.